That is a Panasonic GH5, the thing that is currently recording me, and this is the review of it. So first of all, I want to make it clear that I'm using this primarily as a video recording device as opposed to a stills pictures camera. And while it definitely can do stills pictures, I want to make it clear that that's what the review is going to be focused on primarily. I also want to make it clear that I'm using this with a Metabones Speedbooster. It's the Micro Four Thirds to EF mount, and it's the 0.64 sort of adapter, so that you can get obviously Canon lenses to work, which will mean that in some of the footage you see has a little bit of vignetting, and also I'm not using this with any Micro Four Thirds sort of native lenses. With that said, let's start off with the physical tour. So on the actual sensor itself side of things, you also have a Micro Four Thirds mount. You actually have a 20.3 megapixel sensor. Well, technically it's a 21.77 megapixel sensor, but the actual effective range is 20.3. On the right hand side, you have a flap for the remote in if you want to use an IR remote with it, and you also have a dual SD mount. This is actually really awesome, as you can have in multiple settings. So you can either have it in overflow mode, so when the first SD card fills up, it will just start writing to the second card. You can also have it in sort of piracy mode or backup mode, where it will write to both SD cards if you have some really crucial data that you know you can never refilm again, or you can have it in the pictures on one SD card and video on the other, which is actually quite a cool one to do as well. On the bottom of the camera, you have the battery mount, which is actually protected by a locking flap and a latch to hold the battery in, and this is quite nice. It's very easy to swap out the battery, and it's actually quite clear of most tripod mounts, so you don't have to remove the tripod mount from the bottom of the camera to be able to access the battery compartment. On the left hand side is where you have all of your inputs and outputs. So you have at the top the microphone in, so I'm currently using that with my Rodelink Filmmaker kit, which is the wireless lavsat. You also have audio out, or headphones out, as well as a full-size HDMI port and actually a USB Type-C port. And just on the note of connectivity, you do actually have full Wi-Fi support on here as well, so you can directly connect to the camera and pull the footage off manually with Wi-Fi if you'd like to. Of course, on the back of the camera is where all of the magic happens. So you have a screen which is actually on a rotating arm, so you can actually have it facing you like I currently do now, or you can have it protected away if you want to use the EVF, or you can have it in any variation of position, which is actually pretty cool. You also have the full setup of menu buttons, including a rotary dial. In fact, you actually have on total 3 rotary dials on the camera for controlling the menu system, the different varying settings. You also have a total of 5 function buttons, 4 on the back and 1 up at the top, and on the top you actually have another rotary dial for controlling the shutter type, so if you want single picture, multiple picture, or timer settings. On the right hand side of the hot shoe, you actually have a lockable rotary dial, which is really awesome for changing the picture mode. So if you want it in filming mode, or if you want it in manual or anything else, you can actually lock it in place, which is a really nice feature. And connected to that dial, you also have the on-off switch. Otherwise, you have a few other buttons available for recording, also the shutter button, another rotary dial, and you have a button for ISO, white balance, and exposure. Take a quick look through the menu system. The biggest thing that you will notice is actually the recording mode. So you have quite a lot available. In total, especially in the .mov format, you actually have anywhere between 1080p 30 and 4K 60. With a firmware upgrade, this is actually looking to be 6K, or it's more like 5K, but 5 and a bit K at 30 FPS, which is actually really impressive for such a decently priced camera, considering that it's also a mirrorless DSLR. You also have variable frame rate available on some of the modes, and especially at 1080p, this allows you to set the variable frame rate up to 180 FPS. Now, the way it does this is actually slows down the footage after the fact and ends up just recording 1080p 60 FPS footage, so that you can then record that down, slow that down in post afterwards, so that you get the full 180 FPS experience, but it does still record 1080p 60 footage, so just to sort of clarify that one. Also, you do have 10-bit 42 color profiles available, or recording modes available. You also have, with an extra optional fee-based download, you can also do log recording too. I should mention that you can also record directly to MP4 with this, but the options available are a little bit more limited compared to the MOV recording. So now that we've got the spec out of the way, let's take a look at the footage that I've recorded. I should also mention that if you want to check out some actual in-use footage, then the last couple of reviews that I've been doing, in fact the last couple weeks worth of reviews that I've been doing, have been almost entirely with this camera, starting with the Corsair Void Pro, where I was filming my face with it. So if you want to check out some actual in-use footage, go check out some of the other reviews that I've done recently. But otherwise, let's take a look at some of my specific specific test footage. So this is technically a bit of low light footage. As you can see, I did push it a little bit here, and especially in the black of the cat's fur, you can certainly see some noise there, although the rest of the image is certainly pretty light, so you could potentially pull back a little bit from this, and especially you could lower the ISO here so that you get a bit of a more crisp experience. In this one, the cat decided to walk to the camera, and while I have trouble focusing this in the initial test shots anyway, I was actually really impressed with the overall quality of the image, especially when the cat pulls away a little bit here. It's quite a pretty impressive overall image quality, especially since I did push the ISO pretty far there. In terms of some outdoor shots with relatively decent lighting, a bit overcast, but not dingy or anything, it's still decent overall quality, and in a bit of a more slightly stable subject in terms of the dog walking around. I do really like the crispness of the 4K image here, and especially considering that you can pull the ISO down, there really isn't any noise to be seen in the image. A little bit more of a stable one with me on one of the few days that I can physically do anything, doing some monkey bars. Still quite a nice image, especially on a fairly dark and overcast day. And again, with these housing builds, again, it's a fairly dark image and fairly dark, outside world, but this still does a pretty good job. Also, all of these shots are handheld, so I'm really impressed with the actual sensor stabilization. You can see a little bit of vignetting around the edge thanks to the speed booster and the certain lens that I had, but either way I'm still very impressed. One thing about the slow motion is that you can actually capture some really interesting moments, like the actual ball squishing there, or as you can see, the dog's ears flapping around. Once again, I did have a bit of trouble focusing on this just because I'm kind of a bit more used to the Canon camera setup, and this was one of the more early days that I had it. But either way, as said, I still do really enjoy the slow motion. It's something that I've actually used in a review to test a monitor with recently, so feel free to take a look at that one. A couple of still images before we go. As you can see, some very nice contrast, very nice overall quality, even when you kind of push in the low light scenarios. So what's my thoughts on this? Well, it's actually a really awesome camera, and for the price that you're paying, even with something like a Metabones Speedbooster, you're actually getting a pretty decent deal. I mean, especially with the firmware update coming out very shortly, you'll be able to get 6K 30 FPS footage, which is kind of crazy. Also, especially considering this is a mirrorless DSLR, the actual quality from the image is really very impressive, and it's a big step up from my Canon 100D. Now, I've got to mention that I'm not someone who is wholly experienced in, ridiculously expensive cameras. This is the most expensive camera I've played with to date at the moment, so kind of bear that one in mind when you're coming to conclusions about this review, but nonetheless, I'm really impressed with the overall image quality. The overall usage experience was a little bit more difficult than my Canon setup, as that was a lot more simple to deal with, whereas this one you got to play with the settings and really know the camera a lot better before you can actually make use of it properly. But when you do, it is a pretty decent experience, and there is a lot of granular control available and a lot of customizability, especially with those function buttons and the custom menu settings. A quick note on the Micro Four Thirds setup: it is actually more difficult, at least for me anyway, to find Micro Four Thirds lenses, at least online. So if you are planning on picking one of these cameras up, I would generally recommend picking up a Metabones Speedbooster, so you can use Canon lenses, or if you want to use Nikon lenses, if that's where you're coming from, then feel free to do so. But having an adapter like that means that you actually get the best of both worlds. So if you do find a great Micro Four Thirds lens, awesome, go grab it. But if you find a awesome Canon lens or Nikon lens or whatever, especially something like the Sigma 18-35 that all of us YouTubers love, then you can happily use that as well. So it's something that I'd recommend, but obviously do bear in mind that that is also an extra expense. Now, I should mention that I especially was testing this with a pretty well lit up scenario, and that's because that's how I'm going to be using the camera. I didn't really push it to its absolute limits, as a lot of people picking this camera up will likely do. So if you are planning on picking the camera up, I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below what your thoughts are, what you're planning on doing with it if you are, and especially if you already have one, what your thoughts are as well. As my experiences with it are pretty decent, but of course that's in a mostly well lit environment, so I would love to hear your thoughts. When it comes to scoring for me, I think this is going to be a 4.5 for value for money, although once the firmware update comes out, I think that's actually going to probably bump up to a full 5. When it comes to performance, for its price point, it's probably got to be a 5, but I think overall it'll be a 4.5 just because there are plenty of other cameras that can do a really decent job, especially in stuff like low light. Some of the Sony cameras are pretty impressive there. When it comes to functionality, I think I'm going to go for a 5 here. You know, Wi-Fi support, dual SD cards, mic input, USB Type-C, full-size HDMI, flip-out screen, all that sort of stuff makes it a really impressive shout, and of course all of the recording modes as well. And I think in terms of styling, I'm going to go with a 5 as it's a pretty nice camera. And when it comes to the TechteamGB score, I think it's going to be a 5 and a top tier award. I should make it clear, I purchased this camera and the Metabones Speedbooster with my own money, so I suppose there's either bias or not there, but either way, this is a fantastic camera. I really do enjoy using it. I'm very happy with the upgrade, and yeah, I pretty highly recommend it. So if you want to know any more about the camera or help subsidize the cost of this, then feel free to take a look at the Amazon and Overclockers UK affiliate links in the description down below. There'll be a direct link to this camera and hopefully the Metabones Speedbooster in links down there too, if you want to check that out for the price when and where you watch this. And if you want to support me, then feel free to take a look at the rest of the links in the description down below as well. Otherwise, that is pretty much it. I will leave some other videos over here for you to check out, and as I said, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the camera down below. Even if you're just a viewer of the channel, I'd love to hear what you think of the quality difference down there too, so yeah, leave a comment and let me know. Otherwise, as I said, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you all in the next video.